the month of Teves, and we are at the top of Daf Pei Beis, Amud Beis of Maseches Pesachim. The Gemara is asking a broad question. At this point in time, we were trying to ascertain the halachas of sreifa, that things need to be burnt once they become apostle, and once they become tameh, and once they become noisar. And we had learned this. It seems to be that the psul of yotzei, that psul of yotzei requires a sreifa. That we had learned, at least arguably, from the conversation between Moshe and Aaron with regards to the seir chatas of Rosh Chodesh, the chatas of Rosh Chodesh that Aaron and Cohen did not eat because he was an oinen. We'll get to those halachas a little bit later in the Amud, but he burnt instead. And the Gemara asked the question, okay, fine, that had told us something to do with the halachas of Sreifa for a Yotze with regards to Kochim. But what about Kochim Kalim? And then the Gemara at the bottom of Pebez and Aleph asked a much broader question, which is, we've learned about the dam. We've learned about the halachas of blood that became tameh. That was right at the bottom of the page. We learned the halach of dam, and we learned the halach at the top of Peves and Peves. Nishpach dama, that if the blood spilled, yatsa dama chutz leklayma, if it was taken out. The kavanah b'shreifa. There are all of these things. All of these things require shreifa minalan. Where do we know this from? Rashi says, what are we talking about here? The kaimalan dechol hani b'shreifa. That's the girsa that Rashi has. It says, Rashi, what are we talking about here? Bechol hagmara. Throughout the entirety of Shas, anu motzim bechol psuli kachim yetzelu beis hasreifa uminalan mikra. In the entirety of Shas, we find this thing that psuli kachim have to be burnt. Where do we know that from? We might know bits and pieces of Nosar and Tameh, but this entire institution that, like everything that becomes Tameh, Pasul, Nosar, all of that is taken out to be Nisraf. Where do we know such a din from? Says the Gemara, top of Pei Beis, Amud Beis, Nafgalan mi de Rabbi Shimon. We learn this from the din of Rabbi Shimon. The Tanya Rabbi Shimon tells us, "But kodesh ba'is tisarif." Pasuk says, "But kodesh ba'is tisarif." But kodesh means in the azara. Rashi says that be'ish tesarif, it needs to be burnt in fire. Limed al chatas sheifa saba kodesh. That teaches us about the chatas sheifa saba kodesh, that it is burnt in the holy place, meaning it has to be burnt in the azar of the Beis Hamikdash. Ainli elazul bivad, and I only know this din. Shar psuli kachim, psuli kachim kadashim ve'emuri kachim kalim minayin. How do I know that this is also true of the things that become puzzle of Kodesh Kadashim, of super sanctified sacrifices, right? Triple S, super sanctified sacrifices, that those things need also Sreifa, that's talking about an Ola and Chatas, not Shlomim and not Pesachim. Ve'emuri kachim kalim, and the imur in the pots of the kachim kalim of the shlom of the pesach that are burnt on the mizbech. Minalan, minayin. Where do we know that's from? The pasuk says, "Bakodesh ba'ish ti sareif." The pasuk says, "Bakodesh ba'ish ti sareif." Again, what does that mean? Ashkechan kachim kadashim kachim kalim minal. We only know that this is true of kachim. How do you know that this is true of kachim kalim? Ella kol psuli by kodesh b'sreifa. Anything that is kodesh that becomes puzzle needs sreifa, needs to be burnt. Lo yishna kachim kalim, lo yishna kachim kadashim. Doesn't make a difference whether this is kachim kalim, and it doesn't make a difference if this is kachim. And how do we know this? We don't know it from the pasuk. Gemara Gemirila. This is a halacha l'Moshe Misina. Once again, like we saw with regards to Tumas HaTaim, that this is Gemara Gemirila. We don't have a pasuk that tells us this. This HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu, anytime that you have something that is pasul and noser and pigul and tameh, all of these things, everything has to be burnt. Gemara Gemirila. You'd ask the question, well, what's the alternative? What else would you do with it? Hold on to that question. We'll get there in a bit. Gemara Gemirila, that this is all halacha l'Moshe Misina. Okay. Now you have a question. So then what exactly are we learning, or what was the discussion with regards to the korban that Aaron HaKohen was ostensibly supposed to eat, according to Moshe Rabbeinu, that Aaron did not eat and he had burnt instead. What was that whole discussion of that the blood wasn't brought by Kodesh Pnima, that we had darshened up that whole conversation, that this was Shalos and Chuvas in Halacha, all to teach you that Moshe Rabbeinu was going through all of the options and learning out all of the dinim of when it would be appropriate to burn the korban. So the Torah is just telling us the events that occurred, not to tell us that we're supposed to learn the halachas out of this, because you cannot learn sufficiently all of the halachas from this. Rather, it's halacha on Moshe Sinai, and Moshe Rabbeinu was making reference to some of those halachas when he was having this conversation with Aaron HaKohen. Because this is how it happened, so it happened. Okay, Ulatane debei Rabbi Baravua. Now we have a question. According to the opinion, to the Tan of the debate Rabbi Baravua that we saw a while back, I feel pigul turn ibutsura minalan. According to the opinion that says that even pigul requires, meaning even something that has an intrinsic inherent psul in it, will require ibutsura. You have to wait until it has changed form and shape before burning it, because you're worried about people thinking that bizion kachim, that you're burning kachim unnecessarily, that you're acting in a denigrating way to the kachim. So minalan, where do we know this this halacha? How does he know that is true? Says the Gemara, Yalif oven minosar. He's going to learn Gzera Shavav oven minosar. Now, nosar is an interesting category within korbanos, because nosar, by definition, that which is left over has already undergone ibutsura. By definition, since it is the next day, it no longer looks like it did yesterday. So that is definitionally something that had ibutsura, and therefore we're going to learn Gzera Shava oven minosar, that nosar, just like nosar had ibutsura, so too all other kachim need ibur tsura before it gets burned. So says the Gemara, okay, you want to say that we're going to learn it from Nosar? Maybe you could learn it from the chatas of Aaron. Aaron's korban was burnt, and it didn't require ibur tsura. So maybe we should learn it from there, because Aaron burnt it that day. Amar Lacha, he can say to you, meaning the Tan of the base medrash of Rabbi Baravu will say to you, no, chatas to Aaron ki hai gavna nami. With regards to the chatas of Aaron, which of course wasn't the chatas of Aaron, it was the chatas that Aaron was talking about. It was the chatas of the tzibur that Aaron brought and was talking about. Thereafter was a korban for Rosh Chodesh, which is not a personal korban. Chatas to Aaron ki hai gavna nami. Likewise, ibur tsura lederis baya. In general, for all future generations, it would need ibur tsura. V'hasam harasha haisa. And there was a unique case, because it was on that special day of the consecration of the Mishkan, there was a unique din that occurred there, and that was harasha. Says the Gemara. I mean, you can't learn from that. You can't learn from that day. There were many unique halachas that happened that day. Hashda de amrinan. Okay, now you want to say, now that we've learned out, kol psuli b'kodesh b'shreifa. Oh, we haven't learned out. We now know halacha l'moshe misina, that all psuli kodesh have to be burnt. Lo shnai kodesh kachim, lo shnai kodesh kalim. It doesn't make a difference whether they're kodesh kalim or kodesh kachim. Gemara Gemirla, we learned halacha l'moshe misina by kodesh ba'esh tisarif lamali. So then, what does the pasuk by kodesh ba'esh tisarif come to teach you? That in a holy place it should be burnt in fire. Why do you need the pasuk at all? So Haimi Baile, you need this pasuk to tell you where you have to burn the kachim. It has to be burnt in the azar of the Beis Hamikdash. You know that it's burnt halacha l'moshe misina. Where? By kodesh. It has to be burnt in the place of kodesh. V'abasar asher yiga b'chol tameh lo yachel be'esh yisarif lamali. And then why do I have a unique pasuk that tells me that any basar that becomes tameh is not allowed to be eaten? It has to be burnt in fire. Lamali. Why do you have that pasuk? Why do I need that? Hahu legufe. That you need for itself. Hahu legufe yitzchach. You need that to teach you its own din. What's the din? What's the din? That tumah must also be burnt. Because there is a havamina that you would have thought. You would have thought that tumah would be different from everything else. I might have thought kol psula the kodesh, that all psulim in the kodesh, all disqualifications of korbanos, Kagoin lan dama, like for example, the blood was left overnight. Nishbach dama, or the blood was spilled, meaning not on the mizbeach, but spilled out. V'yatza dama, or if the blood went out of the climb or the azar of the Beis Hamikdash. Nishchata balayla, or if it was shechted at night, which is also absul. B'shev, that all of these things are absulim. Deleisno b'chulin, because all of these didn't have are unique to korbanos. Those are only true with korbanos. Meaning only a korban would have an issue of where the blood went and where it got spilt. And with regards to a regular cow that you want to shecht and eat, have a burger, so you shecht it, there's no problem of where you carried the blood to. Just don't eat it. Don't eat the blood. These are unique dinim to kachim. Aval nitma, but with regards to becoming tummy does exist by chulin. The bechulin nami mifsal, that it would disqualify something that's chulin. Now, it's not also to eat tamei chulin, but it does make it possible, meaning in the sense that if you cannot eat it in a state of kedusha. I mean, you need if you're trying to eat in a state of kedusha, you cannot have chulin that became tamei. Now, of course, all of our meat today is tamei because we are all tamei, and everything that we touch is tamei. But the chulin nami mifsal, in general, tumah does apply to chulin. Emahoel vis avid bei udin dechol. Since you have treated it like chulin, meaning once it became tamei, and now it has had a chulindika treatment, something that is a problem with chulin now applies to this kachim. It now became tamei. What might you have thought? Ema loiti by shofar doesn't need to be burnt. Doesn't need to be burnt. Meaning, it would be denigrating to burn this at this point in time. V'tiskele, and it should be enough to do what? Bikvura, that you should bury it. You should bury it, meaning you should effectively, what we would say today colloquially, although it sounds strange, is put it in shemus, meaning put it in a place that it isn't going to fall into disrepair, that it's not going to be desecrated, denigrated. Bury this basar, and then it'll decompose underground, and nobody will see the denigration of this kachim, because tumah is not a unique din to kachim. You might have thought that if something became tamei, you should bury it, and that would be the havamina with regards to tumah, but it would be the alternative, the chara for everything else. And ba'ish tisarif means that even this needs to be burnt. Okay. The Mishnah had told us, Nitmu abalim, oy shemesu, that the Tanna Kama told us that if the balim became tamei, oy shemesu, or they died, to uber tzura son, that's when you have to wait. You have to wait until the Pesach changes its form, changes its shape, looks like something else, and then burn it. And then we saw that there was machlokes in the Mishnah. Not everybody holds like that, and we'll see a few opinions that disagree. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yosef, says Rav Yosef, machlokes, the machlokes is, shenitmu balim achaz zrika. The only discussion they have is if the balim became tamei after the zrikas hadam. That the meat was fit for consumption theoretically, meaning once the balim died or became tamei, now nobody is there to eat it anymore. But at the point in time of zrikas hadam, it was fundamentally theoretically supposed to be eaten. But everybody agrees, says Rav Yosef, that if the balim became tamei or died before the zrikas hadam occurred, so then everybody would agree that you serve miyad, you have to burn it immediately. It doesn't require it with surah, because at the point in time of zrikas hadam, there was nobody to eat it. There was nobody that could have eaten it, and therefore it wasn't a Pesach anymore. There was nothing to talk about. Meisive, says the Gemara, hold on a second, Zak klal. We have a rule. Kol shepsul b'gufa you serve miyad. Anything that has an inherent psul in the guf of the karban has to be burnt immediately. But dam of a balim to ubertzurasa. If the problem is in the blood, if the problem is in the balim, then it needs ubertzura, then it has to change form before it is burnt. Then it goes out to the Beis HaShrefa to get burnt. And the Mishnah says, Ketani balim dumi the dam. There's a comparison between the balim and the dam, between the owners and the blood. Ma dam lifnei zrika, just like we know the halacha is that the blood is before zrika. Av balim lifnei zrika. If the problem is with the blood, means if the problem is with the blood before you throw it on the mizbeach. I mean, if the blood became possible and then you threw it on the mizbeach, and that which you shouldn't have done, right? But then, in such a case, if you would have done this, so you shouldn't throw it on the mizbeach. But the point of this, of the Gemara's objection here, is that dam and balim are put together in the same clause. And dam is obviously talking about before zrika. And therefore, balim has to be before zrika as well. Meaning, if there's any problem in the dam or in the balim, that means even before zrika, it doesn't need, it needs ibutsura before it is taken out to the Beis HaShrefa. Says the Gemara, no. We have to reinterpret what Rav Yosef said. Ela itmar, hachi itmar. If Rav Yosef said anything, this is what he said. He said, "Machlokes shenitma balim mitnei zrika." Machlokes is shenitmu balim mitnei zrika. If the balim became tamei before the zrikas adam, deloi is chazi basal achila, that the basar is not able to be eaten. The havilei kipsula begufa. That is where it is as if it is a psul in the guf. Because since there's nobody to eat the meat, it's as if it's a psul in the guf. Aval nitmu balim achas zrika. But if the balim became tamei after the zrikas adam, the is chazi basal achila, that the meat is able to be eaten. Divrei hakol psulim achmas davar acher uvaya ibutzura. It's the other way around. Is that everybody agrees that if the balim became pasul, the balim became tamei, or they died after the zrikas adam, everybody agrees there that it needs ibutzura. It's the machlokes is whether or not is whether or not it requires ibutzura if the tumah happened before the zrikas adam. That's what the machlokes is. But after the zrikas adam, everybody agrees. Rabbi Yochanan says, says Rabbi Yochanan, I disagree. I disagree with you. That meaning I disagree with Rabbi Yosef. I think that even after the zrikas adam, there is a machlokes. Va'azar Rabbi Yochanan latame. Rabbi Yochanan is consistent with his rationale. Why? The Amar Rabbi Yochanan holds as follows. Rabbi Yochanan in Breika, is his namesake, same different Rabbi Yochanan, but his namesake. Rabbi Nechemia and also Rabbi Nechemia. They both hold the Amru Davar Echad. They agree to the same thing. What is the same thing? That if there was if the tumah happened after zrikas adam, then it does not require ibutzura. Amru Davar Echad. They agree to the same thing. Rabbi Yochanan ben Breka is Had Amru. That's what we have in the Mishnah. Rabbi Nechemia, what is this din of Rabbi Nechemia? We haven't heard of Rabbi Nechemia so far. We have a brayso that says as follows. Rabbi Nechemia says, this was burnt as a result of aninus. What's this? This is the seir chatos of Aaron, meaning the seir chatos of Rosh Chodesh that Aaron had brought. It was burnt because of aninus. What is aninus? Aninus is the first day after a relative has died, before burial takes place, where one is not allowed to eat from any korbanos. Now, that's not explicitly written anywhere in the Psukim. It is written by the Psukim in Parashas Kisava that detail the person that's bring that's bring his bikurim, and then afterwards is the video maestros. He says Lo achalti be'oni mimenu. I didn't eat from my maestros, my maestros in a state of aninus, and the Gemara in Zvachim learns from that to all the other kachim, gadashim, all the korbanos, that they're not allowed to be eaten in a state of aninus. Why wasn't Aaron Cohen's korban eaten? Because of aninus. Aninus was burnt because of aninus. What do you mean because of aninus? Because there was nobody that could eat it. Nobody was able to eat from this korban. Now there's a long Rashi. If it was an oinen, so then how could it even have been brought? How could it even have been brought? If how could the zrikas adam have occurred? Because it was brought by Aaron HaKohen, and Aaron was the Kohen Gadol, and a Kohen Gadol is allowed to do the avoda in a state of aninus, but he is not allowed to eat from the korban in a state of aninus. That's a unique din by the Kohen Gadol. Okay, that this korban was brought in a state of aninus, and that's why it was burnt, because it had nobody that could eat from it. The Kach never, therefore the pasuk says ka'ile, that Aaron HaKohen says ka'ile in the pasuk. Pasuk says, Aaron el Moshe. Aaron says to Moshe, Hein hayom hekrivu es chatasam. This day they brought their chatas, ves olasam, and their olas lifnei Hashem, in front of Hashem. V'tikra'ena osi ka'ile. And like this happened to me. What does it mean? Like this? Like this, meaning it happened to me like this thing. If a thing like this had occurred, meaning that I'm in a state of aninus, would Hashem want me to eat from this korban? Says the Gemara, "V'ha aninus kila achar zrika havia." This aninus is like after zrika. Now, this is an interesting comparison here. Aninus means, once aninus occurs, it means that he can no longer eat from the korban. But then the moment that aninus occurs, he can no longer eat from the korban. And that is the same as la'achar zrika. That's the same as if it occurred after the zrikas hadam. What does that mean? It says if it occurred after the zrikas hadam, because the purpose of the Korban Pesach is to eat it. That's the entire purpose of the Korban Pesach. I mean, you bring the Korban Pesach so that you can eat it, and the korban was brought, meaning the anina sets in for this korban of the seir chatas of Rosh Chodesh. The aninus sets in, and now Aaron cannot eat the korban. Would be exactly the same, be the parallel to if zrikas hadam had occurred for the korban Pesach, and now there's nobody that can eat it. Meaning everything is finished except for the achila. V'chi itzarif, and when it was burnt, la'alta, the correction is istarif, it was burnt immediately. And therefore, says Rabbi Yochanan that Rabbi Nechemia also holds like Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. He also holds like Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka that if the psul happens on erev, if the balim became tamei, or if the balim died, and it was erev Pesach after the zrikas hadam, then it should be burnt immediately, and it should not require ibur tzura. That he's saying that is the din of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, and that is the din of Rabbi Nechemia. And tomorrow, we will see that the Gemara is going to hold that Rabbah is going to tell us that Rabbi Yossi Aglili also holds the same thing, that it does not require ibur tzura if there is nobody to eat it on erev Pesach. Looking forward to seeing everybody then, and have a wonderful day.